Hey guys, what's going on? Two really quick things before we jump into the show here. If you could follow the links in the description in the show notes, it'll bring you to a place to enter your email for my newsletter. If you also head over to my Instagram, it'll have the same link under my bio. It'll have a couple more links there to the show, my YouTube channel, a couple other things that I'm working on. If you like the show and you want to support by joining the newsletter to stay in touch with everything that I'm working on, if you could please drop your email in there, that would be great. If not, I'm just really happy you're here and you're enjoying the content. Another thing is we lost a bit of connection throughout kind of towards the end of the show. You might not even notice, but I just had to splice a couple things together to make the show kind of continue. But if you're wondering that the conversation jumps around a little bit, that's the only reason why. Probably won't even notice it, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention in case you do. Other than that, guys, I'm really excited for this one. We have a fantastic guest. I'm really excited to bring this to you guys. So without any further ado, please welcome to the show, Alec Zeck. All right, welcome back everyone to Dig Within. As always, I am Rob Edward, and today I'm extremely excited to get this gentleman in front of you guys. He's someone that I have the utmost respect for everything he's doing with speaking truth to power, bringing a spotlight to people who have been marginalized and harmed by companies profiting off of what is happening in the world right now. He was demonetized, demonized, kicked off nearly every platform more than a few times, but just keeps on going. He's never stopping to spread the word of love, understanding, and that we are all one and need to work together to make the world better. His mission and vision for health freedom for humanity and what he has already accomplished is nothing short of astonishing. And with all of that, for how badass he is, he's one of the only few people that I can say I'm not really sure who's more badass, him or his mother. So welcome to the show, Alec Zeck. How you doing, man?
Good, dude. That was quite the intro. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's true, man. What you're doing right now, a lot of people that I've been talking to that knew that you were coming on, it's been an overwhelming welcome to you to be able to speak to you because of the work you're doing is people are really seeing what's going on, and you're one of the few voices that's really speaking it with no reservations in anything. And I know you've mentioned a couple of times of when are other people going to start speaking out that really should be, but what's happened with you and your message has really struck a chord, and I commend you, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time here and doing what you're doing.
Dude, it's an honor to be here, really. Like, I say this pretty consistently. I'm just a dude sharing his perceptions. Like, that's literally it. And I want to empower people to do the same thing as me.
Yeah, and I think you're doing that. And maybe we can just kickstart and just say, what is Health Freedom for Humanity, and why'd you start it?
Yeah, so when I started speaking out about like what's going on in the world, obviously a lot of people started to resonate with what I said. So I gathered a bunch of other influencers and doctors of various types who had similar perceptions, because I saw this idea coming from the health freedom community that only super far right-leaning Trump supporting QAnon conspiracy theorists care about health freedom. And I knew that not to be the case. And then I also saw multiple health freedom organizations, and there's a place for this. There's a place for what I'm about to say, but I saw multiple health freedom organizations going in the direction of petitioning the government, asking the government for permission to be free, pleading with the government to change. And that has its place, especially locally. But what we want to do is completely different, where we're getting people to understand that they are free right now. So it's like those two things when it came to the health freedom movement that I saw a need for, and decided to form an organization around it around November of 2020. And we officially launched in February, and we've sort of exploded. We had no idea that we would want to do like chapters up until a few months ago, but because we exploded so rapidly and so many people wanted to know how they could join us, we were like, let's just start chapters. So now we have 24 state chapters in 4 countries, and we're growing pretty rapidly. And it really is just uniting people from all walks of life, all races, religions, socioeconomic backgrounds, political affiliations, genders, sexual orientations, and perceptions on health, uniting them all under one umbrella, saying like, hey, we all value freedom. We all value health freedom. And yeah, that's what we do.
I was curious, from some of the ways that my life has unfolded, I was open to certain conversations that the world wasn't necessarily what we're told, and behind the curtain is some very, very nefarious kind of things. And so I kind of was under the understanding that things weren't what they were telling us in the mainstream wasn't what was actually happening, especially once this whole thing really started to kick off. And for people who maybe don't know you, who were so taken aback by what was happening, and then you being this voice of reason, could you maybe explain why you kind of understood that the mainstream narrative, especially in the pharmaceutical kind of realm, wasn't really what they're telling us in relation to your, people such as your mom and the things
Yeah,
that you've had with your
for
family and your
sure.
wife
For
and
sure.
stuff?
Like why I had the wherewithal to understand what was going on earlier than, oh, yeah. So for the previous, I want to say 3.5 years leading up to what COVID was, really four-ish years leading up to COVID, I had already done the digging into the pharmaceutical industry. I'd already changed my own diet and my perceptions on health. And that all started because growing up, I grew in a chaotic and in an abusive environment. And my mom was also abused in that process. And because of the abuse that was inflicted upon her, she went to go see a psychiatrist, right? A doctor that was practicing so-called evidence-based medicine, right? An expert. And my mom went to go see the psychiatrist and was prescribed multiple benzodiazepines and SSRIs immediately. Like the doctor didn't talk about nutrition, mindfulness, trauma healing, all the trauma that she had experienced. None of that was addressed. It was just like, okay, you are labeled as this label and this label after this 15-minute talk that I just did with you. So I'm going to prescribe you multiple benzodiazepines and SSRIs. So from there, my mom's health over the next 10 years spiraled out of control, her mental health. And in the up moments, we thought, oh my God, the drugs are working. In the down moments, we were like, oh my goodness, she needs to go back to see this doctor who's practicing, quote, evidence-based medicine, right? And just get on new drugs. In those down moments, she was hallucinating, not leaving her room for upwards of 3 weeks at a time, sitting in the bathroom, picking her face perpetually. It was really dark, in and out of mental hospitals, multiple suicide attempts. And it was dark, man. And we didn't have any idea that it could possibly be the drugs. We started to understand that a little bit towards the end. And so 2016 comes, and this journey has been about 9 to 10 years now. And at this point, we're looking to put my mom in a long-term facility, legitimately, like put her in a long-term facility, because we had already come to understand that we can't have a close relationship with her, that my siblings and I couldn't get too close to her because it'd be too painful if she succeeded in killing herself, and she's going to be this way for the rest of her life. So as a last resort type of thing, she was talking with this therapist she was seeing at the time. And this therapist recommended she go see Dr. Kelly Brogan in New York. And of course, had you looked at that time, and especially now, if you were to look up Dr. Kelly Brogan, you would find that she's a pseudoscientific quack that spreads misinformation, right? And obviously that's not the case whatsoever for anyone who knows who Kelly is, but that's how she's painted in the mainstream. And that's what kind of, when we found out she was going to see Kelly, like, oh, who's this? Like, this lady, does she really know what she's doing? And in a matter of 4 to 6 months after my mom adopted Kelly's very holistic approach to health and really started healing her trauma, and addressing that, and stayed off of the psych drugs, my mom, sides of her that hadn't been around in 10 years started coming out. And it was incredible to witness. And then, because that's a lot of cognitive dissonance to sort through, where she was under the care of these experts, and she's getting perpetually sicker. And then under the care of this pseudoscientific quack, she begins healing for the first time. And that's so much cognitive dissonance, right? Like, how could these experts have been misled? How did they not know? How does this person, so easy, just looking at nutrition completely differently, eating real food and healing your trauma, and that, like, those two primary things, and then some other things. And it was just like so simple, so much cognitive dissonance behind it for me. And then because we saw my mom starting to heal, my wife, who I just married at that time, 9 years prior, was diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And she was under the care of multiple rheumatologists, more experts practicing, quote, evidence-based medicine, right? And she had seen multiple rheumatologists, and they all had like different immunosuppressive drugs that they wanted to try her on. No mention of lifestyle, nutrition, like mindfulness, none of that stuff. And after we tried this approach with my wife, she reversed all of her autoimmune symptoms in a matter of 4 months, was off all of her medications. We went back to her rheumatologist for another appointment, and her blood work was normal for the first time in nearly 9 years. And that with this approach of this so-called pseudoscientific quack, right? And so those two experiences put me into a state of cognitive dissonance that I had to break through. And then there's so much just questioning and this never-ending questioning on the nature of disease, on health, on the nefarious intentions or possible nefarious intentions from the pharmaceutical industry. Like, how is it that people that are in the Western medicine model continue to get sicker and sicker and sicker for the most part, and then people outside of that, or people step away, like my mom and wife, and how do they begin to heal? And just dissecting all that, man, I've never really stopped questioning. So when COVID hit, I will say at first, I fell for the Chinese propaganda that happened. Like, I fell for that. I saw people dropping dead in the streets, or what looked like people dropping dead in the streets. And I saw that our mainstream news wasn't talking about it yet. So I was like, oh, they're trying to cover this up because they're not addressing it yet. And then slowly over time, over the course of the next month or so, I noticed that that wasn't happening here. And that's when I was like, okay, I see what they did here. They're just trying to scare us. And I knew beforehand that it was going to be about the vaccine. Even on February 29th, 2020, I just found this video recently. Just a random video that I had on my phone of me without a beard talking to the phone. I was like, what is this? Go back and look. And it's a video that I recorded on February 29th, 2020, saying that this will no doubt be used for mandatory vaccines for all people. So that's how I was able to see through the narrative from a early stage.
Right. Yeah. And I think what you're touching on there too, I think was something to do with myself as well. I knew it from my background in the entertainment industry, the very nefarious things that go on there. I wasn't aware of how deep the tentacles were in the pharmaceutical industry. But now it's obviously very, very well known. And I think the huge thing too, I'm not sure if you knew this coming from your background, and then obviously now with everyone that you've interviewed and all that kind of stuff, was the virus versus germ versus terrain theory and that kind of stuff. And that again opens up a whole can of worms of all that sort of stuff, but it hits on almost everything you're talking about. And I was just wondering, because you've, with your organization that you've had and the people that you've had on your podcast and all that kind of stuff, you've talked to some of the best and brightest people on the planet right now on this topic. And I was wondering if you could maybe explain, if you can, in layman's terms, what people like Cowan and Kaufman and Stefan Lanka, what their work kind of means, and if people can conceptualize that in a way that makes sense. Where, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like just covered germ versus terrain theory. So, man, I'm happy you asked this because I've given so many talks on this recently. So this should be a fairly easy one for me to cover, I think. Awesome. I hope so. Can't promise anything to the people listening to this, but I should be good. So the idea of germ theory is that we have these pathogenic viruses and bacteria that are out there to get us. Like that is their role in nature, is to be pathogenic for the most part for bacteria, and then for all cases when it comes to viruses, right? That's what germ theory says. Then really there's terrain theory, but there's almost 3 tiers to terrain theory, right? There's terrain theory that says, yes, viruses and bacteria are pathogenic, but only in someone who is already in a toxic state, or in some nuanced cases, where someone has a genetic predisposition, then viruses and bacteria will be pathogenic. Then there's a step up from that says, okay, bacteria are not pathogenic, but viruses are, they're not pathogenic either, but they're part of our virome. Like they're used to exchange genetic material between us. That's the role of viruses. They're not pathogenic, but they're there as a communication mechanism, and we have a virome inside our body. Then there's a level above that says bacteria are not pathogenic, but viruses don't exist. They have never been proven to exist. And that statement for people, especially since there's an entire field of science surrounding it, and we flipped the whole entire world upside down for this virus, how could that possibly be that there is no virus, that viruses don't exist, right? And that's personally the camp that I fall into, in the camp of viruses have never been proven to exist. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna use an analogy here, and this is an analogy that Dr. Cowan uses that is phenomenal. It's amazing, and it's in the beginning of his book, Contagion Myths. So if I were to hypothesize that a ping pong ball could break through and like break down a brick wall, logically, I would need to observe that ping pong ball taking action on that brick wall and causing it to break down, right? So if I took a giant hammer and smashed the brick wall several times, and then taped that ping pong ball to a giant boulder and threw it at the wall, and the wall breaks down, have I shown that the ping pong ball caused the destruction of that brick wall? I would think anybody thinking logically would say absolutely not, because you already weakened the brick wall when you hit it with a hammer several times. And then you also added the ping pong ball to other things, and that's what caused the destruction of that brick wall, right? So how does that relate to viruses and virology? Without exception that I've come across, and I've come across so many virus isolation papers, every single paper that says isolation of insert virus into the title, right? Any paper that you can find on PubMed or any medical journal, isolation of blank insert virus in that case. So let's say in this case, SARS-CoV-2, isolation of SARS-CoV-2. When you read the methodology of that paper, the process that is described is the exact opposite of isolation. And what's described in that process is they take a monkey kidney cell, which is called a vero cell culture, right? They add in cytotoxic antibiotics like amphotericin and or gentamicin. And all you need to do to find out that those are toxic to kidney cells, like this monkey kidney cell, is Google or DuckDuckGo, Google amphotericin toxic kidneys or Google gentamicin toxic kidneys. And you'll find a number of articles where they're known to be cytotoxic antibiotics, especially to kidneys. So that they're putting that on this monkey kidney cell, right? Alongside Delbecco's modified eagle medium, fetal bovine serum, and then minimal nutrient medium, meaning that they're like giving the cell the minimal amount of nutrients to maintain its life. So they put all those things in there. And then they also put unfiltered snot from a sick person who they say is sick with this virus, right? They never validate that there is a virus in that snot when they do these studies. They just see a person experiencing symptoms of disease, assume that his snot contains a virus in it or a bunch of virion like viral particles in it. They assume that based on the presentation of symptoms, they take that sick snot unfiltered and throw it on the kidney cell as well. So they're putting all these things on there. They presuppose that there is a virus inside the fluids of the sick person that they just introduced to it. And then the cell breaks down after adding all those things added to it. The cell breaks down into a bunch of fragments, essentially because it's being starved and poisoned, starved by the minimal nutrient medium, and then poisoned by the cytotoxic antibiotics and unfiltered snot and all the other things they're putting into it, right? So they effectively starve and poison the cell. It breaks down into a bunch of fragments, experiencing what is called the cytopathic effect. They take pictures with an electron microscope of those fragments and say that those are viruses. That is every single virus isolation paper without exception that I've come across, at least. And so relating it back to the ping pong ball example, they've never taken a purified virus from the snot of a sick person and put it on the cell culture or introduced it to a healthy host and proved that it caused disease. They've never, ever done that. So it's again, like saying that the ping pong ball is causing the destruction of the brick wall. You're saying that the virus that you presuppose inside the snot is causing the destruction of that cell, but you've never shown what it looks like when all the other ingredients are included without the supposed snot from a sick host. Except for Stefan Lanka has done that exact same experiment recently, where it's called, he's doing 3 different phases for this experiment. In the first phase, he's doing that exact same process, right? Without introducing any snot from a sick person. So he put in the fetal bovine serum, Delbecco's modified eagle medium, amphotericin and or gentamicin, and then minimal nutrient medium. The cell experiences the exact same effect, regardless of whether there is supposedly infectious material from a sick host. Relating it back to the ping pong ball example again, is it would be like if you did the same experiment without even having the ping pong ball present. And you were hypothesizing originally that the ping pong ball is what caused the destruction of that brick wall. But clearly by your experimentation, it wasn't, or like it was questionable because you didn't have the ping pong ball by itself, right? So you do the same exact experiment without the ping pong ball present, proving that the ping pong ball was never what was causing what led to the effects that you were witnessing, right? And Stefan Lanka's example, he's showing that. He's showing that it was never the snot from a sick host that you even presuppose. At least with a ping pong ball example, we can look at the ping pong ball. The other example, we presuppose that there is a virus present in the fluids, and then we add it to the experiment, and then we say, it must have been the virus that caused all those things to break down.
Fantastic. Honestly, that is exactly what I've been trying to communicate to people as well, especially in everyday life, because it's so unbelievably difficult to really wrap your head around that. But it's so, because what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you kind of have this as well, but when you say that viruses don't exist or they aren't the cause of disease, people hear no one's getting sick. And okay, so you deny all disease and illness, and
immediately. That's how people respond.
Right.
And so that's what people are confusing on. Sorry if I'm interrupting.
No.
That's what people are confusing on this point is we are not saying COVID-19 is not real and that people aren't getting sick. Relating it back to 9/11, regardless of your perceptions on what happened there, that's a whole nother discussion. But
no, let's dive into
that would be like Building 7. No, but it's people weren't saying that people didn't die from 9/11. We're saying what was the cause of people dying on 9/11? What was the true cause? It's the same thing with this. Yes, people are getting sick. People have a presentation of a disease that you can like say these series of symptoms are COVID-19. COVID-19 is a series of symptoms. So yeah, absolutely. You can say that's a real thing. It'd be dumb not to say that, right? It'd be dumb to say otherwise. But what we're saying is, where is the evidence that it is a pathogenic disease causing particle that is passed from person to person? And to add to everything that I said earlier, all you have to do to verify this is ask virologists, epidemiologists, any of them, ask them to provide you one single paper, just one, in which a virus was isolated, purified, characterized, and sequenced directly from the fluids of a sick host. Meaning, like, if it is in the sick or in the fluids from the sick host, then show that it's in the fluids from the sick host. It's that simple. Like, do that directly. And the only thing they can provide in response is more of those vero cell culture isolation experiments where they're taking that snot from a sick host, presuppose it's a virus, putting it on the cell culture, and then it breaks down to a bunch of fragments. So their excuse is that's the only way we can continue to grow the virus. Like, we have to take the snot from a sick host and put it on that tissue. How do you know that's the only way you can grow a virus if you've never first established that there is a virus inside the fluids of the sick host? You've never validated that foundational claim. So the definition of pseudoscience is anything that claims to be science but does not follow the scientific method. Virology has never conducted proper control experiments until Stefan Lanka has. And actually, ironically, John Enders, the guy who invented that method, by his own admission, he never did proper control experiments. But pseudoscience is anything that does not, or claims to be science, does not conduct control experiments, or claims to be science and does not follow the scientific method. And the scientific method includes doing proper control experiments. It includes validating your foundational claim. It includes identifying an independent variable. Virology has done none of those things. So the other thing you can ask virologists is, find me one paper in which virology strictly adheres to the scientific method and validates their foundational claim of a pathogenic disease causing particle inside the fluids of a sick host. They can do neither of those two things. And their primary excuses are, again, the cell culture, we need it to grow. Or they'll say the reason we can't find one where it's isolated, purified, characterized, and sequenced is because there's not enough virus particles present in the fluids of a sick host. And it's like, that makes no sense, because this is supposed to be the thing that is causing that host to experience disease or die, and it's supposed to be transferred to another person. How could it be possible there's not enough in the fluids of a sick host? Or they'll say that the virus is too weak to isolate and purify directly from the fluids of a sick host. They'll say that, but in the same breath, virologists say that a virus travels freely through the air, lands on a surface, survives on the surface for upwards of 2 days, makes it into someone's body, makes it all the way to a cell, breaks into the cell, hijacks the cell's machinery and begins a replication process that overwhelms that person's body and other people's bodies, and is passed from person to person. So it's too weak to isolate, purify, characterize, and sequence in one breath, but in the other breath it can do this. It makes no sense.
You can't have both of those arguments. The fall, for me personally too, it's the falling down of logical inference. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've studied much of the classical trivium and the quadrivium, which we used to be taught in the days of old, which was grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which is basically data input, processing, and data output, and learning logical fallacies, because that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing that two things can be true at the same time. There's no, it's all moral, it's all sort of relative, moral relativism, and all that kind of stuff, and appeals to authority and all that. It just, for just on the other side of the, and what Andrew Kaufman says too was, I think his response to that was, okay, well, what if you got it from 10 people? What about 20 people? What about 100 people? What if you gathered all of that? Like, this is what this whole thing is hinging on, yet there's not enough of it and it's too weak. It doesn't really, I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it was the experience that they asked. It was what they're sharing on Mike Adams' show, that they asked the virologists, okay, what if you had the fluids of 1,000 people, mashed it together, all those people were sick, would there be enough virus present there? And the answer is no, not enough virus present. So it's like, it's illogical.
So I'm wondering, I was thinking about this recently, that from one of the hard things for people to understand too is the question that you always, or the response I think you always get too, is, well, there's no way that everyone's in on it, right? This is too big for it to be kind of this worldwide global thing. And I think that the thing that I was thinking of is, recently it's come to my attention that, like, the concept of germ theory, because it's tied up with the pharmaceutical company so deeply, that that pharmaceutical company has its tentacles in nearly everything, in terms of media, politics, allopathic, naturopathic, all of the different, it's almost like this entire conversation is the basis point of almost every single way that you can control people, because it's saying that your body is unintelligent. It's actually weak in relation to the outside world. You're not a part of nature. And there's this invisible boogeyman that's out to get you, that's being passed from person to person. And it seems like the actual, what they've done to control sort of almost every single facet of every source of either media and politics, all that kind of stuff, it all hinges on that pharmaceutical kind of theory of germ theory. And that seems like that's why they're latching so hard onto this, because there's really nothing left with the work that you're doing and the people that you've interviewed. There's not, you have to basically really not look at the question and just disregard it for the rest of your life from now on, because as soon as you contend with it, it's done. Yep. Yeah. Well, and dude, this is the linchpin for, just like you said, for the entire narrative to crumble, which is why it's so important. But I even had a friend of mine the other day say that it's completely wrong to even bring this up at all. Because I even explained to him, like, when it comes to health freedom for humanity, I don't project that onto my organization, like that we are only a terrain theory organization. That's not the case whatsoever. We welcome all health perceptions. But individually, like, I'm going to talk about this because I have done the digging myself, and I was willing to go there and go look, actually, like, obsessively over the past year. I've dived so deep into this topic, and it is important because when you get to the depth of this topic, you realize how fraudulent this actually is. And to be clear, to say that all doctors or scientists are in on it, my response to that is, when it comes to vaccines, for the people in this community, when it comes to vaccines, do you think all doctors are in on it? And of course, all of them are going to answer, no, I don't think doctors are all in on it. They're just doing what they were told and what they learned. It's the same thing when it comes to this. I don't think all virologists are in on it necessarily. No, I don't think all doctors are in on it. I think they are doing what they were taught. I don't think any virologist, or there's very few virologists, and I do actually know some molecular biologists too, who I've spoken alongside at events, and they see the fraud for what it is. But it's very rare for them to, because they're just doing what they were told. And when it comes to this method of viral isolation, they're literally doing what John Franklin Enders did, and doing it without question, even though Enders questioned his own experiments back then. That's what's crazy about this. Yeah, I think in his thing, he said that he can't, with the control or without the control, we can't really tell which one has the actual cell culture in it or not. They're indistinguishable from the two.
Yep.
And I think it's also one of those things where, because the main hinge point of this entire thing is the fact that, like, you're weak, your body's not contending with the world and all that kind of stuff. The other side of that is, if you contend with this, for one, it makes you take personal responsibility for everything you put into your body, and again, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, all of those different things. But the empowerment that you can come out of that with is ultimately the thing I think that they don't want people to understand, because again, it takes all of the power away from the institution, of which is convincing you to keep buying the product, and saying you actually have all of the power to do exactly what you want, and it's all within you, and it's perfect, and it's a complete system. And it's like, who does that benefit? Right? It doesn't benefit them.
Definitely not pharmaceutical companies or the medical establishment. I mean, that's what's tough about this, is it's like, I mean, of course, people have been victimized by the system in very like horrible ways, without question, right? Like even my mom, for an example, or my wife, for an example. But this really takes you out of a victim mentality, because it really puts you back into understanding that your health, for the most part, is entirely in your hands. Like there is no need to be afraid of some boogeyman virus or bacteria out there that's coming to get you. It really is showing that health is a function of what you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of hit this home. It's quite incredible what's going on, and I think that what you're doing, at least to people who are seeing this, are gaining hopefully that empowerment. But also, I really want to touch on, because honestly, what you put out with the voice of the victims, first I want to ask you essentially what that is, but just kind of hit home to people. If you listen, like, they are almost too hard to listen to, which I think is such a powerful thing that you're doing to help these people really get their message across. Because you have to the idea of looking into the abyss, you have to have the light within you to look within that, because it's so deeply moving. But yeah, if you could maybe explain to people what the voices of the victim is, and what your message is with that.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate the acknowledgement there, because those episodes, like, first off, for me, like recording them, like they're really hard to do, especially like multiple times a week. But I cannot imagine what it's like for the person that is being interviewed, that, thought that they were doing the right thing by trusting these experts, signed up to receive that product, were injured by that product, and potentially thought people like us were crazy, people that questioned were crazy, got that product, were injured by it, and then are receiving help from no one, and having to face the reality that, like, wow, this is a real phenomenon. Vaccine injury is real. It's happening to me right now. And then having the bravery, especially considering you just had to flip your own paradigm, but also because the majority of the population, you know how they look at this issue, and you yourself are suffering, and to be willing to come on to someone else's show to share what you're experiencing is, I mean, it speaks volumes to the character of those people. But essentially what the idea for Voice of the Victims podcast series was to interview people who have experienced the harmful effects of pharmaceutical drugs via lack of informed consent, mandated medical procedures, or other things relating to health freedom. And obviously, because the COVID vaccine issue is a hot topic right now, and there's a lot of people who are, experiencing that as being covered up in the media. We've predominantly covered, I think it actually exclusively only covered people who have been injured by the COVID shot thus far, or know someone who was killed. And man, just to highlight some of the episodes and some of the information we got, like, one of the people we interviewed, Pamela Goodman, her son worked on Broadway, and her husband also worked on Broadway in New York City. And her son got the Johnson & Johnson shot and died within 12 hours. And even on the death certificate, it said that it was caused by the Johnson & Johnson shot. Everyone on Broadway knew that he died because of that. Everyone knew. His dad, when he went to, or he didn't want to get the shot. He had no desire to go get the shot because of, I mean, they had already been seeking in that direction anyway, but his son just died, right? And because he didn't want to get the shot, he was fired by Broadway for not getting the shot after his son just died after receiving the same shot. So it's that. And then there's two people that we've interviewed that can no longer work and are having to move out of their home because they're not receiving any compensation from the pharmaceutical companies. And then, we see an article that like featured in Forbes magazine that the Pfizer CEO is set to make, or that Pfizer is set to make what I think it was $33.5 billion off of vaccines this year. So you have that in one case and this in the other. It's disgusting, man. And those episodes are so important for people to hear though. Dude,
Okay.
you're pretty knowledgeable on this topic, by the way. On terrain.
Man, I've been watching you, Matt. I've been working with Matt Beller for the better part of a year, and he's really kicked my ass to get out there and start talking about this stuff. And I've been into this stuff for as long as this whole thing's been going on. And it's honestly, man, people like you have really inspired me to finally say this stuff, because I'm sure you've had this in your life too, where as soon as you started talking about this, you lost probably a lot of people around you. And for me,
Dude,
almost every single person, close friend, everything like that, it's difficult. And yeah, you're really shining a light for that kind of stuff, man. Honestly, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing.
thank you, bro. I really appreciate that. That means a lot.
Let me just actually go back to the voice of the victim stuff. So just essentially, I would really urge people to go and try to listen to those things and have an open mind as to where on either side of where you are with this entire topic or whatever, is to at least listen to those people, because I think they are deserving of at least your consideration of listening to what's happened to them, because there's people that are on both sides of the aisle, at least from what I've heard, is they thought people like us were crazy, and some people were unsure and they've heard rumblings and whatnot. But just the marginalization and the fact that most of them start talking about what's happened to them and they're ousted just as much as anyone else. And it's like, these people actually had something happen to them. So I think again, they're very difficult to listen to, but they're so important. And I can't commend you enough for giving them a voice like that.
Man, I can't not like it, after hearing their stories and just having the full depth of knowledge on what I know and what my organization knows is going on. It's so important for people to hear these stories. And like you said, like either side of the fence though, too, everyone needs to hear these. Everyone needs to hear these episodes, especially people on the other side, because at least this will provide some context or consideration from a person's story of like why we are saying no to this, why we are standing up against this, at the least to fight for the right to choose.
And I think you've said this a number of times too, but it was one of the realizations I had too, was you have a company that's making billions of dollars in 1 year. So they're $1 trillion company, and they produce a product of which they have no liability to have any sort of background of having it actually be safe or whatever. They're totally liability free. And then you have a mother, or you have an individual who has actually went through something, either with their, like you said, their kid, something like that, and the idea that the mother is lying and the industry and the entire huge company that's $1 trillion, they're the ones that are telling the truth. It's flipped on its head. And for me personally, I think it's because people they really can't conceptualize it being as bad as it is. And I was wondering, yeah.
Like, do you want me to go into the pharmaceutical industry corruption?
If you got time.
Well, what do you want me to cover? Because like, dude, that's the main thing. This notion that these moms who saw their child or they themselves were irreversibly harmed by these products, right? That they are lying. They have nothing to gain by standing up and speaking out, especially with the way society views this, that they're super far right-leaning, QAnon supporting Trump conspiracy theorists. That's that notion that is accepted amongst society, that these people are crazy and they have nothing to gain by speaking. And then the pharmaceutical industry, who controls the media, controls the government, and there's receipts that I can share on that. They financially control the direction of them. That they're telling the truth is absurd, especially given the context of the criminal history of some of these pharmaceutical companies.
It's pretty incredible. And again, like, I'm trying to be mindful of your time here, but there's so many tangents we can go off with just that one piece of the conversation, right? But one thing I wanted to ask you is, you've been kicked off Instagram, is it 7 times now? So 7 times, yeah. And there's some interesting facial recognition kind of story with that. And I'm just curious, with all the censorship, everything that's happening in the war, with you just trying to get this information out to people, why continue? Why trudge forward with this?
Dude, I can't say anything except that it's the right thing to do. Like, honestly, especially having done a lot of childhood trauma healing from 2016 through 2019, I'm still doing more now. I mean, it's a never ending process, but I've come to understand for the most part who I am and my place in this world. And with that is letting go of the need to care what anyone else thinks. And if these are my authentic perceptions and I'm sharing them from a place of love and compassion, there's nothing wrong with me sharing them. Like that is okay. And in fact, like anyone who's coming from that position, even if their perspective is diametrically opposed to mine, it's important that we hold space for them to share. And so I can't not do it. I have, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. These are my authentic perceptions. I have to share them. And everyone should get to that own point in their own life where they are so at peace with who and what they are and their place in reality, their relationship with God or source or creator, whatever you want to call it. Everyone should be getting to that point of just sharing authentically where they're coming from. And that's what I'm doing, man. And I'm going to continue to do it. And it feels good.
Yeah, honestly, you're making such a huge impression for a lot of people that I think either A, don't want to admit, or B, just people that are really, really happy with what you're doing. And I think I share your sentiment too with people. You had a recent post that basically said, I thank you very much for telling me that I'm doing great speaking and all that kind of stuff. But when is it your turn? When will you speak out? And honestly, seeing you over the past 2 years do this has really been one of the catalysts of me actually starting what I'm doing right now. So I can't,
Dude,
honestly,
that means a lot. Thank you.
You're an initiating factor for that too. So it's all over the world, man. Like you're having this impact for a lot of people and everyone a part of Health Freedom for Humanity, your organization. It's incredible what you guys are doing. And I'm curious as to, with you've spoken to some of the best people in the world right now in so many different aspects and areas. And in your honest opinion, what's happening? Like, what do you see going on? And maybe you can take that in any direction you want to, but like, what do you see happening?
That's such a loaded question. Oh, like what the direction of like what's coming, or like what is happening currently?
I guess potentially both, in terms of why is it that we're going through what we're going through, and then
on the highest like overarching spiritual level.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, let's go with that one.
Yeah. Okay. Man, why? There's so many layers to this question. Humanity is supposed to go through this experience though, because this is what humanity birthed. This is what humanity collectively chose to do, for whatever reason. And then that's a combination of what individuals chose for their specific lives, but then also wove a path and affected other people's lives. And this is what humanity chose in large part. There's also an element of the nefarious actors that are at the top of this experience are dictating our perceptions in many ways and conditioning us to think a certain way. So that is also causing us to manifest more negative things, right? But the whole purpose of this whole COVID experience and this life in general is that we are born here under the veil of forgetting who and what we are. And that is pure source consciousness, whatever you want to call it. We are born here forgetting who and what we are. And we do that so that we can help consciousness grow, because when we forget who and what we are, and that is pure love, source, unity, we would never make a choice that would harm others or harm ourselves or harm the environment, because we understand that all of those are fundamental aspects of God, source, energy, whatever you want to call it. But we undergo that forgetting process so that we can make a more authentic choice. And we see the spectrum of evil that is available on, the deepest, darkest, like worse than Adolf Hitler type stuff at the tippy top, like some of those things that we think of to be conspiracy theories, like really deep things. But even what's going on with COVID right now, where people are being manipulated into doing something that is harmful for them, but they think it's for their own good. These people that are manipulating them to make their own authentic choice, right? and not imposing their will upon them, but like manipulating them to make their own authentic choice, to do these things that are harmful under the guise of something that is good. That is like the depths of what evil does. But we need to be able to witness that. Then also the other end of the spectrum, this polarity, the good, and then our souls need to make our own authentic choice. So that's ultimately what we're doing individually and collectively, because when we're making that choice, we're also perpetuating that reality. Like anytime we make a choice that's more to the positive side, we're perpetuating that reality. To the negative side, we're perpetuating that reality. And then there's a spectrum of in between, right? But we need this experience fundamentally for the growth of the human race and of the universe and of all creation. That's ultimately the whole point of this experience. So I went to the deepest deep on that one.
I love it, and it kind of led me into my last kind of questions here, and I'd like to flip the script on you if you wouldn't mind, if you don't mind me plagiarizing some of your work, but I've got a couple questions for you that I'd like to ask you because you always ask them. I don't know if people do this to you all the time, but I thought it'd be interesting. Is you're walking through a door to the new Earth. What does Alec Zeck see?
Man, I see a space where people are so unafraid to be who they are. Like, but they're also doing the work to dissect who they are and to discover who they are. And they're shedding those layers of conditioning that have been impressed upon them and getting back to, I'm a unique individuated portion of God's creation. And whatever that manifests at, as long as it's from a position of love, if their perceptions as that are diametrically opposed to mine, that is a good thing. That is a beautiful thing, because going back to my perceptions, in order for consciousness to grow and to expand, or humanity to grow and to expand, we need those different individuated experiences. We need those. We need all of it. And it's for people to accept themselves and love themselves so much that they recognize that there is no other self, that they are a fundamental aspect of the eternal, the infinite and eternal self. And all that there is love. And that is all that there is to express. There's only love in abundance. And we don't need to be afraid of other people. We don't need to impose our will upon other people. We need to just be open and open up our hearts. And if everyone could operate from the same position as that, if everyone could operate from their own individuated vision of that, just standing as love and sharing love and being open to all of the other opposing perspectives, man, this world would be such a better place. It already is beautiful, but that's the conditioning. We've been accepted to dismiss the beauty here and now. And if we just practice that here and now, in each now moment, everything will change like that. Everything will change. And that's, again, the deeper version of what I see. And what comes out of that, I don't know, but the creation out of that for each individual and collective couldn't be anything other than beautiful.
Well, man, you're well on your way to contributing to build that, and all the work that you're doing and outputting to people to inspire them, I think is directly in relation to exactly what you just said. And I think you're building that right now with everything that you're doing. And honestly, first of all, I can't thank you enough for taking the time from me, for sharing you with my audience. I really, really hope people enjoy this one. And I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing, man, and being shadow banned and all that kind of stuff. What if people want to, when they want to sort of check you out and your organization, everything like that, how do people find you nowadays, man?
It's a good question, because by the time this releases, my account could be deleted again. So the best way to find me is probably my Telegram channel, honestly. Like, that's my most consistent, like, haven't been censored there yet, and I think they do censor, but my Telegram channel. So that's t.me/the way forward, but forward is spelled FWRD. So /the way forward, FWRD. That or healthfreedomforhumanity.org. That's my organization's website. So you can find me and my organization's work there. So
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much for making the time. I cannot thank you enough. And I hope people enjoyed this, and hopefully we can connect again sometime soon. We made this one happen, but yeah, we got to get you back on here for some more time. I really enjoyed this conversation, man. I hope people did too. And can't thank you enough. And yeah, hope we'll talk soon.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Everything will be in the show notes below. If you did enjoy it, give it a like and thumbs up, and let me know in the comments what you think and who I should get on next. All that fun stuff. I really want to bring more people like Alec to you guys to spread empowerment solutions to make this world a better place. So thanks, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.